Hi, everyone. This is Matthew Kaplan from InMobi's marketing team. Very excited today to be joined by a special guest in a great conversation all about political advertising, a very hot topic certainly this year with the upcoming presidential election. And today, very excited to have Chauncey Southworth join me today in conversation from Cross Screen Media. Chauncey, thanks for chatting.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Fantastic. And so your role is the director of ad ops at Cross Screen Media. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So basically in this role, I am managing the advertising that we're doing for our customers, whether they be political or not, across all of our digital networks. Really, what we do at Cross Screen Media is look at primarily video, but really all forms of digital advertising, and use a variety of inventory sources and networks to get the most efficient, cost per view or cost per impression if it's display for each one of our customers across a wide range of inventory.
Fantastic. Great. So I really wanted to dive into things because I know this is the political election this year is definitely going to be dominating the news cycles between now and November and probably beyond that, to be honest. There's only a short amount of time between now and November 3rd, between Election Day. So how are the political advertisers that you're working with, how are they thinking about digital advertising this election cycle?
Yeah, it's great that we're actually doing this the first official day of campaign season, the Tuesday after Labor Day. But in terms of digital advertising, and in terms of advertising overall for political advertisers, it's a little bit different than the other verticals out there where you have a long sales cycle, or you're building campaigns out months in advance. For political advertisers, you have a very short window of time to take all of your budget and reach as many and persuade as many voters as possible to get them to either get out the vote or change their mind before the election. So most of that spend is actually done between now and the election, these couple months. In terms of digital advertising in itself, this is and has been, as it's grown in the past few cycles, a great way for advertisers to effectively reach their audience and spend that budget in the time that they have to do so. It's a little bit more efficient in most cases than the older versions of advertising, broadcast, cable, television buy-in, because you are able to target to the individual level and reach the specific voters that you are looking for. So you're not wasting budget across all, everybody in a media market or a cable zone. And it's not to say that those other formats are not great ways to reach your voters, but digital advertising has become a much larger piece of that puzzle. And at Cross Screen Media, we've taken that a step further and have built a software called ScreenSolve, which allows us to take a look at the individual consumption habits of everybody within the audience, so that we're not only just putting a set percentage to television or a set percentage to digital advertising. We are actually recommending different budget allocations based on how the audience consumes their video, whether that be on broadcast and cable, which we don't buy internally, but we help optimize, or digital, which we do purchase internally.
Yeah, and I think that certainly makes sense, especially as time spent online is growing, especially now while many of us are still largely stuck at home. You got to be where the voters are ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of think about this, and a primary voter in the Democratic presidential primary is going to be very different than a Republican voter in October in Iowa versus Texas. There's just so many different demographic changes, or geographical and demographic changes across who you're trying to reach. So it doesn't really make sense anymore to do just a set percentage on television, a set percentage on digital, because you're going to be missing out on your voter base. And we're really taking the approach of looking at the individuals and not just have a cookie cutter approach.
Sure. Yeah, and so, one thing I'd love to dive into more. So here at InMobi, obviously, we're very focused on apps as an app first company. I know you mentioned digital broadly, but what has the approach been as far as kind of mobile apps specifically, at least as far as what you've seen this election cycle?
Yeah, definitely. We spend a lot of time, not only looking at the consumption habits of the individual in the audience, but the actual inventory that we're serving on to make sure that we are getting, we look at an effective CPM, not just the cost per impressions. We're looking at how to reach voters and people within our audience on quality inventory that is highly viewable and targetable. So just in turn, that means, in-app has become a much larger piece of that puzzle because it is highly viewable. It's right in the palm of the, attended user's hand. So it's highly, it's viewable, but it's also right there. And it's targetable. So it's kind of like the best of all worlds. We've also seen a big growth in CTV for like the same reason. And we have gone out in the last couple of years and really made it a priority to build within our networks inventory sources that have a lot of in-app, a lot of CTV, so that we are reaching our voters in a place where they are engaged with the content.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. One thing I'm curious as well, and you kind of touched on this a little bit previously. So we know time spent in app, time spent watching TV, or CTV, excuse me, time spent on digital channels of all sorts has been increasing. But for a long time, political advertising has really been defined by massive TV buys, direct mail campaigns, yard signs, things like that. Are you starting to see opinion or perceptions among the political advertisers that you work with change as a regard to digital channels, or has it been maybe a little bit slow going still?
It really depends on the individual campaign and where they where they're prioritizing their spend. We think that you should be looking at your advertising holistically and buying in places where your audience is consuming their content. There's not to say that direct mail and yard signs and big broadcast buys are not still a really important part of the advertising package. And like my background before I got into digital politics was just campaigning, and that's all really important to touch those voters where they are. At the same time, there are a lot of great sources out there to buy media that are more effective, targetable, and viewable to reach your voters. So it has grown, and every cycle, campaigns and PACs and advertisers are taking a closer look at digital. And every cycle we see increased growth in those channels.
Perfect. Yeah, my follow-up question was going to be, who's spending, but it sounds like it's everyone is kind of embracing digital to some extent this election cycle.
Yeah, definitely. I think more campaigns now have a better idea of who they're really trying to reach, and just even if you don't have the individual consumption habits that we have across green media, you kind of have an idea of if you're trying to reach younger voters. Digital is the place, and connected television are the places you're really going to be able to hit them. If you're trying to reach older voters in a demographic that did not index as highly on connected television or digital, then the broadcast and cable buys are still a great place to put those dollars. But it's about taking a closer look and being not just doing the same thing that you've done in the past, but really doing what's efficient.
Yeah, I mean, in so many ways, this is going to be a highly unique election cycle, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Then that we're just talking about consumption habits and the changes in ad spend, but we haven't even talked about the coronavirus and how COVID-19 is going to affect all of this. And that's going to just push even more spend to advertising, and especially video advertising.
Yeah, I would imagine, because people are staying at home, that both video advertising broadly and digital video advertising more specifically is probably gaining some more traction. That certainly would be my guess. Is that what you're seeing on your end?
Yeah, and we at Crush Media and our founder and CEO Michael Beach, along with one of our one of our partners, came out with a report early in the year about projecting just that video political spend for this year from Democratic primary right up to the general. And when COVID really hit and the lockdowns started, we took another look at the projections that we made early in the year, and we actually changed the projections and we increased them. We actually made, we said that we're now projecting a 12% increase over our first set of projections, up to $6.7 billion of spend in this election cycle. And that's for a variety of reasons. People they're not able to campaign in person, so that money is going elsewhere. Fundraising has still been great for many campaigns, and people are consuming content at home, so it's the place to reach them. At the same time, it has changed a little bit where campaigns held back spend throughout the summer a little bit to make sure they knew what was going on. It was hard to figure out how to message in a national pandemic. And also, we lost the Olympics and sports and these things that in an election year are usually a big component of buys. So the spend is actually going to be a little bit more backloaded starting like around now through the election.
Yeah, and I think in addition to all of that, as a result of COVID, I would imagine that maybe when people are voting for some voters is going to shift. Some states have announced entirely vote by mail. Certainly, maybe some voters might be more inclined to vote by mail or vote absentee or vote early. Has that impacted how the political advertisers that you're working with are thinking about timing when it comes to advertising and messaging?
Yeah, timing and also who you're hitting. Like that, this is a really important piece that we do in that audience targeting that I've talked about a few times now in terms of being on target and viewable with your advertising. We've gone out and built absentee and early vote models and have them preloaded for our customers so that they're actually looking at the people that will be voting early or be voting by absentee, because you kind of have to have a different strategy. You have to chase those ballots when they go out, and then you have to exclude those individuals when they start to vote, and that's all information that we're able to get through the public information, and we're going to be excluding those people as they vote from our campaign so that we're really being efficient for our customers, and that's where we really have to start thinking about not doing this just like we did it in 2018 and 2016, but doing it now with for our audiences, for the new audiences that we're going to have because of where we stand right now in the world with COVID and everything else that's going on. And then also taking a look at the new regulatory policies that the big players are putting in. The Facebooks and Googles have changed everything a lot for political advertisers, and you just can't do it the way you've always done it. You have to be agile, and you have to be looking at your audience and making sure that you're thinking about the voter in your advertising strategy and not just thinking about how you've always done it.
Yeah, I think it goes back to a point you've mentioned now a few times, that it's really, really all about your audience. Who are you trying to reach? What do they care about? What actions are they taking? And how can you make sure you're talking to them in the best way possible?
Yeah, definitely.
And so one thing I'm very happy that you mentioned Facebook. So obviously in 2016, social media was very much dominating headlines in a variety of ways as a result, as it relates to political advertising. Here in 2020, all the different channels have kind of taken various different approaches. Some are allowing it, but with limitations, like Google on YouTube and Facebook now with their latest guidelines. Other channels have decided just to not allow political advertising at all, like Twitter. these social media channels were really key in 2016, but they're definitely going to be playing a much different role in 2020. And I'm curious, as far as what you're seeing, have those changes around social media caused political advertisers to think about digital channels differently than they were even maybe 2 years ago for the midterms?
Yeah, I think I can't say every advertiser is thinking differently that's out there, but at the same, like how we're thinking about it is, Facebook has obviously announced that they're not going to allow any new ads in the last week prior to the election. Google took away the ability to target first party audiences across YouTube and their display network and DV360, their DSP. So these are big changes with massive players, and groups like Spotify on the audio side have just removed political ads completely, and it really has made us take a step back and take a different approach. And this is actually something we've been doing even before these restrictions came into place. And in 2018, we really moved to that effective CPM, looking at the targetable and viewable impressions instead of just impressions. And when you start doing that, we saw even then that Facebook had lower viewability rates for video because it's in feed and you can scroll past the units. When Google announced that they can't target audiences, that increases that eCPM because you're going to be serving outside of your audience. So we've really taken the approach of those are still very important pieces of the media mix. Like Facebook and YouTube are not going away. People are on them all the time. Like they're really important places to hit your audience. At the same time, we have to have a different strategy and not just put all of our budget to those platforms. And we've gone out and like I said earlier, in-app CTV, really highly viewable desktop mobile inventory has been a much larger part of our media mix and our ad stack. And we're able to find really efficient, good inventory there to hit our customers where they're consuming the video. So that is all really changed for us, and it's just changing our media mix and making sure that we're agile and able to move our budgets around as we get data back. So it's not just set it and forget it anymore. It is as we get this data back and we're seeing our cost per views and we're seeing our reach numbers and we're seeing the sites that we're serving on and constantly moving that budget around to be more efficient. And I think that's really important. And that's what we're trying to do for our customers so that we are getting the most for our budgets out there.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. It's, as things change on the ground, you have to be flexible and agile to make sure that you're getting the most out of your potentially limited budgets between now and November. That makes a lot of sense. I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into CTV a little bit. So it's such a hot space. There's certainly been a lot of buzz around it. And certainly I've seen a number of stats that show that CTV is being, people are at home, so viewing CTV a lot more. I'm curious on the political advertising side, are you seeing political advertisers really embrace CTV and devote a decent amount of budget to it, or is it still a lot of testing to see what works and what doesn't for that platform?
Yeah, definitely. It's becoming a very large part of political advertisers' media mixes and budget allocations at this point, for a variety of different reasons. One being it's the big screen in a household, and it looks and feels like the type of ad that political advertisers have been used to since Eisenhower or before. So that's a big piece of it, just on where it's showing. It's highly viewable, it's highly audible, and it's also targetable at the household level. So this is, again, really important that we're not just blasting an entire DMA with these ads. We can be really targeted with them. So it's just kind of the best of both worlds. It's the highly viewable ad that moves the needle that we're used to, and at the same time, we have the digital component of it being targetable, being across inventory sources, and being able to track it in that way. So In 2018, when like audience targeting for CTV was first coming into the mix, we were really testing that, and it became a big piece of our media mix then, and that's only grown since, and everybody else is doing that as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that's curious as well. So, across all of the digital channels, be it in-app, CTV, um, mobile web, what have you, I guess my question to you is, like what can mobile apps and maybe kind of the wider ad tech space do to make all these kind of digital advertising channels, I guess, more appealing and more effective for political advertisers?
Yeah, I think one thing is trying to compare their inventory, not just making the quote unquote like emotional argument for their inventory, but really making a data driven argument for why they are better or just as good as the big players in the market. YouTube, Facebook, Hulu, these groups have they're large sales teams and they have great marketing. At the same time, what we've really tried to do is again compare the viewable, targetable, effective CPM. And when you do that, you look a lot better. When you make the argument that Facebook has a low viewability rate because it's in feed across a large targeted campaign, and now Google can't target audiences, and Hulu has affinity audiences but aren't able to target at the one-to-one level. And those are just to name a few. And again, those are still very important pieces of the puzzle. But if you walk into a room and are able to argue that your effective CPM is comparable or better than the places they're already buying, it's a really easy argument to, not say I need all of the ad budget to come to me, but like cut off a little bit from here and there and win more based on how quality based on the quality of your inventory. So I think that's a really important piece that we've been helping our customers understand. We've also been helping ad sellers understand as well, and just putting that into a different perspective. It's also important to be able to talk in terms of rating points, as well as a CPM or effective CPM, so you can walk into any room, whether it be a TV buyer or a digital buyer, and be able to talk in the same language.
Yeah, and I think that's really good advice, even if it's not a new channel or a new way of advertising, that you really need to have a good understanding of what am I going to get if I'm spending X, what am I going to get in terms of Y, who's gonna see it. I think that's probably really good advice for all advertisers, honestly.
Yeah, and it's these are all learnings that don't just apply to a political. Political is just weird because we have to spend so much money in such a short amount of time. And we have to spend it to zero. Having money, if you lose by 100 votes and you have money left over the day after the election, nobody's happy with you. So it's a strange vertical, but these are all things that should be applied to verticals outside of politics as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I want to go back on a little bit. So you mentioned previously, kind of television advertising, which again was all about video. Certainly, between CTV and other digital channels like in-app, video advertising is definitely going to be a key part to political advertising this year. I'd love to hear your thoughts a little bit, specifically as it relates to video advertising. What kind of trends are you seeing with the political advertisers that you work with?
Yeah, with the ones that we're working with, kind of what we've talked about a little bit already is more looking at a holistic approach and buying video based on where the individuals are consuming that content. We're seeing a lot of growth in CTV. We're seeing growth, especially internally, with buying on like in-app, where it's highly viewable and targetable. Buying more, as more groups move and CTV consumption and more high premium content is being watched on connected devices. making sure that we're up on all of that stuff, whether it be sports and news, the what sports we've had this year so far, and but local news and national news, and just being up on all of that, I think has been a little bit of it's something that we've always wanted in the past. Now we're able to do it more and better because people are consuming more. We're able to target it at the household level at least, and that's all been really important for us. At the same time, we've just seen the whole market grow. We saw this has been a kind of a interesting election cycle with Michael Bloomberg coming in the beginning and spending a lot, and the president's campaign spending a lot throughout this entire year. Vice President Biden's campaign now, really ramping up. Plus, all of the down ballot races are spending more on digital and linear television and cable television video to get their message across. So, and again, COVID is even increasing those numbers, and political will probably be the biggest vertical of growth in the video advertising space this year. It's been more important than ever.
Sure. Yeah, I think especially now, I mean, television advertising, video advertising has always been beneficial because it has such a huge impact. And now that you are unlikely to be holding mass rallies, or maybe much fewer mass rallies, other kind of campaign events, that you do need to use channels like video to really reach your audiences today, because they're unlikely to, or maybe a lot of people are maybe unlikely to meet in person in a gymnasium, let's say, like they once were. I guess maybe a question for you. So I think certainly COVID has accelerated some of these trends in the industry. Post 2020, once we hopefully, knock on wood, are able to go back to our regular lives again one day, do you see some of these trends sticking around, or do you think this is maybe just kind of going to be a blip in the history of political advertising, as it were?
I think this is just going to continue to grow as CTV and OTT, so connected video consumption is showing no signs of slowing down, and COVID might just be the catalyst that speeds it up a bit. But we really think that there is just going to be every cycle larger growth in the amount that's being spent, and the amount that's being spent on video, and then in turn the amount that's being spent on digital and connected devices. It's just going to be more important every cycle, especially as the electorate changes and more younger people are voting and engaged. And again, that's where it's really important to know your audience and know if you're serving a campaign to older primary voters, then television is the place probably to hit them. And if you're serving to really young people and you want to get them engaged, then you need to be on digital channels, and you need to be on connected channels, because they're not going to see it on linear television if they've cut the cord or drastically reduced their consumption of linear television. So it's really just about, you have to know your audience, and you can't just do what you did the previous cycle or the previous two cycles. Because again, in politics, we do this, we really do this once every other year, and a lot changes every other year. So you have to just stay up on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly the presidential election takes up all of, or most of the news coverage, but between the House races, issues-based campaigns, Senate races, governor's races, this is anything that you might learn this year, you're going to be, applying again in a year to 2 years time, truly.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. Well, Chauncey, really appreciate your time today. If anyone has any follow-up questions, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, they can go to crossscreen.media. A lot of information about what we're doing there. and feel free to contact us there. My personal email is csouthworth@crossscreen.media. Always available. Please reach out. And also, we have the updated projections for this year that we've put together for political spend, and it'd be great to be able to link that as well.
Fantastic. Great. Well, really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us today.
Great. Thank you.